When winter laid a thin layer of mist over the suburbs of Denver, I, Helen Carter, 67 years old, widowed less than 2 months, was thrown out of the very house I had built for 43 years by my own daughter. That afternoon, the sky was gray. Cold wind swept through the tall pines in the yard. I was still wearing the wool coat Edward, my husband, had picked for me on our trip to Seattle. Yet my daughter, Melissa, stood in the doorway, her eyes frozen, speaking to me like I was a stranger. "Mom, this isn't your home anymore. You better find another place to live out the rest of your days." All I had were 2 old suitcases and a wooden box of family photos. I heard the crunch of gravel under the wheels as Ryan, Melissa's husband, hauled my luggage to the trunk of his brand new BMW. He never met my eyes. He just muttered, "Flat and empty. Helen, living on your own will make you more independent. No property taxes, no leaky roof to fix." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling around the suitcase handle. That 2-story wooden house with a wide porch, where I used to hang Christmas wreaths and bake apple pies every Thanksgiving, now belonged to my daughter. As I stepped down the porch, the wood groaned under my feet, as if it was saying goodbye to me. 3 hours later, I was curled up on a sagging bed in a roadside motel. Neon lights flickered outside the window, casting shadows on the cracked wall. In my pocket were just $200 Melissa had shoved into my hand like charity. In one afternoon, I'd gone from a devoted wife, a caring mother, to a woman with no home. But I had no idea just 3 days later, the same daughter I raised would come back, begging me to save her life. And that's when the real game began. Before everything fell apart, my life looked peaceful from the outside. I was a devoted wife, living with Edward Carter, the man I called my husband for 43 years. We married when I was 24 and he was 31, full of ambition. The 2-story wooden house on the edge of Denver was Edward's pride. He bought the land that faced the Rockies, where winters were buried in snow and summers lit up with wildflowers. I was the one who decorated each room, planted lavender along the walkway, hung every curtain. But no matter how much of my youth I poured into that place, Edward always called it his achievement. In our family, Edward's love for our daughter Melissa was almost unconditional. He called her his little princess and gave her everything she wanted. When she demanded to attend an expensive private school in California, I took on 2 part-time jobs just to cover the costs. I remember those late-night shifts at the corner store, the smell of weak coffee, the bell on the glass door ringing each time a customer walked in. I gave up finishing college because I believed my daughter needed the opportunity more than I did. To Melissa, I was just the cook, the cleaner, the one stretching every dollar. I still remember when she was 15, I handed her a sweater I had knitted all winter. She smirked and said, "Mom, I don't need cheap stuff like this. Dad will buy me something better." My chest tightened, but I stayed quiet, believing one day she'd understand a mother's love. Then came the day Melissa got married. Ryan Hayes, an investment banker with sleek suits and a polished smile. Edward couldn't hide his pride. At their wedding in a fancy Denver hotel, he raised his glass and declared his daughter had found her match. I sat at the back table, smiling stiffly, my gut whispering that Ryan wasn't the family man he appeared to be. The years rolled on, and I kept my quiet routines. I cooked, cleaned, cared for every detail of our home. On Thanksgiving, I roasted the turkey myself, made the chestnut stuffing Edward loved, and never forgot to pour him his favorite red wine. Yet at those dinners, I was always the shadow at the end of the table, listening to Edward and Melissa discuss investments, listening to Ryan talk about stocks and real estate. As the years passed, I realized my role in the family was like an old wooden chair in the living room unnoticed, but if it was gone, the whole room would feel empty. I existed to hold everything together, though no one really saw me. Until Edward died. A sudden heart attack at 71. The funeral was held in early February, snow piling thick over the cemetery lawn. My hands shook as I clutched a bouquet of white roses, my fingers numb from the cold. Melissa, wrapped in a luxurious fur coat, hugged me with a look full of pity. She whispered, "Mom, I know this is hard for you, but you can't stay in that big house alone. It's not safe." I forced a faint smile, but deep down, something felt off. That tone wasn't just concern, it carried calculation. I didn't know then those gentle words at the funeral were the first step into my nightmare. After the funeral, my big house turned strangely silent. When I walked past the living room, I could still smell the faint smoke of pine wood from the last family gathering. But instead of warmth, all I felt was emptiness. Melissa started coming over more often. And never alone, Ryan was always by her side. They didn't come to share my grief. They came to sweet-talk me. One weekend evening, the wind from the Rockies howled, making the pine needles whistle on the porch. Melissa spread a brochure across the dining table. It was for a retirement community 10 miles away. On the cover, smiling seniors sat by an artificial lake. "Mom, this place has everything you need," Melissa said, her voice so sweet it felt fake. "There's a pool, yoga classes, friends your age. You won't feel lonely anymore." Ryan sipped his wine and chimed in. "Helen, you shouldn't handle a house this big by yourself. It's costly, it's dangerous, especially the stairs. Over there, everything's convenient. They've got medical staff too." I looked down at the glossy paper, the fake colors making me sick. I knew what they meant. It wasn't about care. It was about selling the house, pocketing the money, and pushing me out of their lives. In the weeks that followed, their persuasion campaign only grew stronger. They brought more pamphlets, talked about the benefits of friends your age. Melissa even carried a notebook listing out roof repairs, property taxes, utility bills like I was a child who couldn't add things up. I remember one dinner. I had cooked honey-roasted chicken, Edward's favorite. Melissa set her fork down, stared at me, and said, "Mom, I really worry about you. You need a better environment. This house holds too many sad memories. You'll never heal here." Her words pierced me, not because she was wrong. The house was full of memories, but because of her eyes. That wasn't sympathy. That was the look of someone who had already picked out an item and was just waiting to claim it. I started noticing things. The way her gaze lingered on the leather sofa Edward had chosen. The way her fingers brushed the polished wooden railing as she walked upstairs, the same railing I had shined every weekend. She was taking inventory. One late night, I stood in the kitchen, watching through the window as their BMW headlights disappeared down the gravel road. That's when it hit me. I was their target. Melissa wasn't coming to comfort me. She was coming to take. And sure enough, a few weeks later, the mask finally slipped. 6 weeks after Edward passed, that morning seemed ordinary. The Colorado sky was clear and blue, sunlight falling across the snowy ridges in the distance. I was making coffee in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Melissa and Ryan, each dragging a large suitcase. Melissa's eyes carried a coldness I had never seen before. She walked straight into the house like it had been hers all along. "Mom," she said firmly, "we've decided. Ryan just got promoted, and we need to move back into the city. And this house is perfect for our family." I froze, unable to believe what I'd heard. "Move in here? But this is my home. The home your father and I built our whole lives." Melissa crossed her arms, her voice flat, like she was reading a contract.
"No, Mom.
According to Dad's will, I'm the sole heir. The house, the accounts, everything. I let you stay here out of kindness, but now it's time for you to find somewhere else." Each word cut like an icy blade. I trembled and asked, "Are you sure? Maybe there's been some mistake." Melissa's eyes flashed with cruelty. "There's no mistake. Dad trusted me to manage the estate better than you. You're just the wife. You don't understand money or investments. Just the wife. 43 years of sacrifice, raising a child, caring for my husband, all reduced to 3 heartless words." Ryan carried the suitcases upstairs while Melissa leaned against the doorframe, glancing at her watch like she was waiting for a cab. "You should pack quickly. There's a senior community on Maple Street, very affordable. I think they still have rooms available." I bit my lip until it bled, shame burning inside me. My own daughter, The one I stayed up countless nights worrying about her tuition, now treating me like a burden to be tossed aside. I hurried to gather what little I could: a few clothes, a box of old photos, our faded wedding album. My entire life now fit into 2 suitcases and a wooden box. As I stepped down the porch, the wood creaked under my feet. The sound I'd known for decades now felt like a cold farewell. Ryan placed my bags in the trunk, shut it neatly, then said in a casual tone, "Helen, you'll feel better not having to deal with taxes, roof repairs, or shoveling snow anymore." I didn't answer. In my eyes, every brick, every window carried memories. Melissa's 10th birthday with a strawberry cake, Christmas when Edward hung lights around the porch, the nights I stayed awake caring for him after his first heart attack. All of it stolen in a single morning. Their BMW rolled off the gravel road, leaving me at a roadside motel. The flickering neon sign read, "Sunset in $49 night." The room was cramped, walls stained yellow, the damp smell clinging to every breath. Melissa shoved $200 bills into my hand, smiling like she was giving charity. "Enough to get you by for a few days. Ryan will send more once we finish the paperwork." The door shut, leaving me alone on a sagging bed, listening to trucks roar past on the highway. I stared at my suitcases, my chest tightening. In just 3 hours, I had gone from grieving widow to homeless, abandoned by my own daughter. But in that moment of despair, a memory flashed. Edward had shown me his will a few years back. I remembered every word, and it was nothing like what Melissa just claimed. My heart pounded. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The night at the motel dragged on forever. The AC rattled. The neon outside flickered against the stained ceiling. I lay there wide awake, heart pounding, Melissa's words echoing in my head like a curse. "Mom, Dad left everything to me." But my memory couldn't be wrong. I remembered that afternoon a few years back when Edward carefully pulled out his notarized will from the drawer. He pointed at each clause, explaining them with rare seriousness. He was always meticulous, never missing a detail. And I knew one thing for certain: he would never leave me with nothing. The next morning, I put on my old wool coat, grabbed my small handbag, and caught the bus into downtown. The office of Charles Whitman, Edward's longtime friend and lawyer, was inside an old red brick building near the federal courthouse. I took a deep breath, my chest tight, as I stepped into the marble-floored lobby. Charles, now in his 70s with silver-rimmed glasses and snow-white hair, frowned when he saw me.
"Helen,
"I've called your house so many times, but Melissa said you were traveling to cope with the grief." I was worried. I froze. "Traveling? No, Charles. I've never left the house. And I never received any papers about the will." He lowered his glasses, confusion filling his eyes. "Wait, you didn't attend the reading of the will? Melissa said you were too heartbroken and gave her power of attorney." A chill shot down my spine. I shook my head. "I never agreed to that. Melissa told me Edward left everything to her." Charles shot up from his chair, rushed to the file cabinet, and pulled out a thick folder. He opened it, flipping quickly through the pages. "Helen, listen carefully. This is the final will, signed and notarized just 6 months before Edward passed." I bent over, my eyes falling on the familiar words, Edward's neat signature at the bottom. Charles read aloud, his voice steady. "I, Edward Carter, leave the entire property at 1827 Oakwood Drive, along with all possessions and keepsakes, to my wife, Helen Carter. In addition, she will receive 70% of my financial assets, approximately $23 million. My knees buckled, and I gripped the edge of the table. Charles looked straight at me, then continued. "The remaining $10 million I leave to my daughter, Melissa Carter Hayes, in a trust." But his tone dropped. "This trust will only be released when Melissa turns 45, and only if she treats her mother with kindness and respect after my passing." My mouth fell open. I couldn't believe it. Edward, he had seen it all coming. He knew Melissa's arrogance, her greed. He had written protection for me right into the will. Charles closed the folder firmly, his jaw tight. Helen, what Melissa did is a crime. She hid the real will, forged documents, and even forced you out of your own home. This is elder abuse and financial fraud. I sat frozen, tears welling up. All my quiet endurance shattered at once. Melissa hadn't just betrayed me, she had destroyed her own chance at her father's inheritance. Charles laid a hand gently on my shoulder, his voice firm. Helen, you haven't lost anything. In fact, you now hold everything. The house, the accounts, the money, $33 million in total. And Melissa gets nothing because she broke the condition. I gasped, torn between pain and a fierce sense of justice. All my life, I'd been dismissed as nothing more than the woman who scrubbed floors and cooked meals. Now the truth turned it all upside down. Charles the First whispered, "What do I do now?" He smiled, his eyes sharp. "Now, Helen, we let justice speak." And Melissa is about to face the biggest shock of her life. That afternoon, Charles Whitman's office turned into a command center. He was on the phone with the sheriff, the bank, even a private investigator. I sat in an old leather chair, my hands clasped tight, my heart still shaking from the shock. "Don't worry, Helen," Charles assured me. "Everything Edward left is protected by law. I'll work with the bank to freeze any accounts Melissa and Ryan tried to move into their names." 2 hours later, things started moving so fast I could barely believe it. The bank called back. All accounts under Edward's name were frozen for fraud investigation. The credit cards Melissa had been swiping for her luxury dinners and boutique shopping declined on the spot. Charles's phone rang nonstop, his voice steady and sharp. "Yes, lock that one too." "Correct this account as well." "No, she has no legal authority." I sat quietly, overwhelmed, but for the first time since Edward's death, I felt a sliver of light. At exactly 3:47 p.m., my phone lit up. Melissa's name flashed across the screen, buzzing hard. I hesitated, then picked up. Her voice was frantic. "Mom, what's going on with the bank?" "My card's been shut down. They said all accounts are frozen. They're asking for proof of ownership." I closed my eyes, forcing calm into my voice. "I'm sitting here with Dad's lawyer. You remember him, don't you? Charles Whitman. He just read me the real, well, the one you hid." Silence. Then Melissa rushed in. "Mom, you're mistaken. I only wanted to protect you from the stress of managing money. You don't know how to handle a fortune like this." I let out a bitter laugh. "Protect me? By kicking me out and handing me $200? That's a strange kind of care." Her tone shifted, pleading now. "Mom, please. Don't make this worse. I'll give you a share. We can work something out." I cut her off, my voice like steel. "You don't have anything left to share. The $33 million belongs to me. And you've lost it all because of how you treated me." I heard her breathing hard on the other end. Then she stammered. No, that can't be." Charles motioned for me to keep her on the line. He nodded, and just then another voice broke in. Detective Maria Rodriguez from the Denver Police Department. Her tone was firm. "Melissa Carter Hayes, your actions constitute financial fraud and elder abuse. We're opening a full investigation. You should prepare to face a summons." I heard Melissa scream, "This is a joke. I'll sue all of you." Then the line went dead. Charles looked at me, the corner of his mouth lifting. "See, Helen? The board just flipped." That night, the news spread faster than I imagined. The bank shut down Melissa and Ryan's transactions. The utility bills they had switched into their names were frozen for investigation. In a single day, they went from self-proclaimed heirs to 2 people with nothing. The next morning, Denver police reached out to me. "Mrs. Carter, we'd like you present when we execute the arrest." My heart raced. A part of me was still a mother, but another part wanted to see justice with my own eyes. That evening, I sat in a car with Detective Rodriguez, parked near a fancy downtown restaurant. Warm yellow lights glowed through the windows. Inside, I spotted Melissa in a red dress, Ryan in a sharp suit, laughing with friends. Rodriguez whispered, "It's time." 2 officers walked in. Through the glass, I saw it all. Melissa froze as the cuffs snapped onto her wrists. She screamed, mascara running down her face.
This is a mistake.
I'm the rightful heir.
My father wanted this.
Ryan didn't escape either. The next morning, he was arrested at his office. Fake documents were uncovered at a print shop he had ties with. When I heard, I just sat quietly in Charles's office. He looked at me and said in a low, steady voice, "Helen, justice has begun. Now you truly hold everything." I breathed deep, my chest heavy. Part of me hurt it was still my daughter, but another part felt free. For years I had been dismissed, treated like I was invisible. Now the truth had flipped the table. I was the one holding all the cards. When the first news reports of Melissa and Ryan's arrest aired on local TV, I thought it was finally over. But it turned out that was just the start of another storm. A week later, I sat in Edward's study, the room he always kept locked, the one he rarely let me enter. Dark wooden walls, shelves stuffed with files, the desk still marked with little dents from where he used to tap his pencil while thinking. I flipped through folders left behind. At first, just routine bills. But the more I read, the more wrong it all felt. Huge payments for financial consulting from companies I'd never heard of. A string of loans with no recipient listed. Service contracts with businesses that only existed on paper, with no real address. I picked up the phone and called Charles. His voice turned grave. "Helen, let me bring in a specialist. I want to make sure we understand the full picture." The next morning, Carol Chun, a private financial investigator, arrived. A sharp-eyed woman with quick hands, she sifted through every page. For 6 hours she photographed, scribbled notes, cross-checked data. By late afternoon, she looked up, her tone heavy. "Mrs. Carter, I'm afraid I found something very serious. Your husband Edward was running a sophisticated money laundering operation for over 10 years. Millions of dollars flowed through his consulting firm to clean money from criminal organizations." I froze. The wooden chair felt like stone beneath me. No, that's impossible. Edward was the most honest man I ever knew. He loved his family. He watched every tax dollar. He couldn't have. Carol slid contracts and invoices across the desk, matched with FBI case files. I know this is hard to believe, but the evidence is undeniable. He wasn't just involved, he was a key player. The room spun. My mind went back to Edward's sudden business trips, the late-night calls he took, saying clients needed him urgently, the unexpected sums that appeared in our accounts. I'd always assumed it was his savvy investments. But the truth was darker. My chest ached. The man I loved for 40 years, the man who held my hand at my mother's funeral, had hidden a devastating secret from me. I felt betrayed and broken all at once. Just then, Charles walked in. After hearing Carol's summary, he let out a long sigh. "Helen, if the FBI uncovers this, all assets could be seized as proceeds of crime. The house, the money, everything." I clutched my head, tears spilling. "So, even what Edward left me isn't really mine? I'll lose it all?" Charles nodded softly. "We have to face that possibility." The next afternoon, I got an unexpected call. Melissa's voice came through, hoarse, but still laced with calculation. "Mom, we need to talk. There are things about Dad you don't know. Things that could change everything." I sat frozen, my heart pounding. I had no trust left in my daughter, but this time, there was a bitter truth in her tone. She knew Edward had ties to crime. Melissa's voice sharpened, cutting through the line. "Ryan's lawyer has already reached out to the FBI. If I cooperate, we could get immunity. In return, you'll have to give up most of the estate. You can keep $5 million and the house. The rest will be gone." I gripped the phone, heat rising in my face. My daughter, the same one who betrayed me once, was back this time bargaining with the sins of the man I loved. And in that moment, I knew the game wasn't over. It had just moved to the next round. A round I was forced to play, no matter how painful the truth. That night, I sat alone in the quiet living room. The lamp threw a warm glow over my wedding photo with Edward. In the picture, he smiled wide, his eyes bright with confidence. I touched the glass, my chest tightening. Who was that man, really? I couldn't just sit by while Melissa and Ryan used the secret as a bargaining chip. I called Charles.
Charles, I want to meet with the FBI.
Right away. The next morning, I sat across from Agent Sarah Martinez, a federal agent with her brown hair pulled back and a hard look in her eyes. She set a recorder on the table and looked straight at me. Mrs. Carter, do you understand that by voluntarily giving a statement, you might be admitting you benefited from illegal money? I nodded, firm. I understand. But I'd rather tell the truth than let my daughter and son-in-law use this against me. I told everything about the files Carol found, about Melissa's phone call last night. Each word hurt, like I was betraying my memory of Edward. But the more I spoke, the more I felt freed. Agent Martinez listened, took notes. When I finished, she exchanged a look with a colleague, then faced me again. A small, unreadable smile touched her lips. Mrs. Carter, there's something you need to know. Your husband wasn't a regular money launderer. He's the most valuable asset the FBI has had in over a decade. I froze, thinking I'd misheard. What do you mean? She leaned forward, speaking slowly. Edward Carter cooperated with us as an undercover asset. For 12 years, he pretended to run the laundering operation to get inside the Torino crime family, a group known for moving hundreds of millions through shell companies. The money you saw was actually monitored by us. Part of it was kept to maintain his cover, and by agreement, that part became legal when he died. My mouth fell open. My heart felt heavy and like it was exploding at once. Edward was an agent? And the $33 million is legal?
Yes.
Agent Martinez nodded. What he left you is completely legal, cleared by the Justice Department. More than that, because of his work we broke at least 47 major cases and seized over $200 million from criminals. He risked his life to protect his family and this country. Tears streamed down my face. I remembered his mysterious trips, the nights he stayed up with piles of papers, the calls he ended the moment I walked in. It all clicked into place. He hid the truth from me not to betray me, but to protect us. I whispered, shaking. I used to blame him.
I thought he betrayed me.
Agent Martinez put a hand on the table and softened her tone. No, Mrs. Carter. He trusted you enough to know you'd be okay, even if he wasn't here. And now his legacy is more than money. It's a chance for you to do something meaningful. A new energy rose in me. Shame and despair turned into pride and resolve. Melissa and Ryan thought they could manipulate me with Edward's secret. They didn't know the bigger truth. That secret didn't hurt me. It made me a key witness in a federal case. Agent Martinez looked me in the eye, sharp as a blade. Mrs. Carter, we need your help. Will you cooperate to bring Melissa and Ryan into the light? We want you to wear a recording device at the next meeting. Everything they say will be evidence. I took a deep breath and wiped the last tear from my cheek. After what they did, I'm more than ready. Give me the recorder. In that moment, I felt it clearly. I was no longer the weak widow my daughter discarded. I held the secret. I was the last piece on the board that could turn into the queen. 3 days later, I sat in the living room, wearing a thin cardigan, a small recorder pinned to my chest by Agent Martinez. I watched the clock, heart racing. At exactly 8, there was a knock on the door. Melissa and Ryan walked in, dressed like they were about to sign a $1 million deal. Ryan carried a leather briefcase, confidence written all over his face. Melissa tried a soft smile. I'd seen that face enough times to know when it was acting. Mom, Melissa cooed, you look so much better. I'm glad you're doing okay. I nodded, hiding the tremor inside.
Sit down. So, what do you want?
Ryan opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. We drafted an agreement. You keep the house and $5 million in clean assets. In return, you won't say anything more about what Edward did. That way, everyone stays safe. I stared at him, then let out a short laugh. Clean assets? Is that what you call what you think you understand about Edward? You sure you know the whole story? Melissa blinked, flustered. Ryan frowned. What matters is we move past this and protect the family. If you don't sign, you lose everything. I leaned back, my heart pounding. voice steady. No, Ryan. Losing everything is what's waiting for you too. Right then, the door flew open. Agent Martinez and two other agents stepped in, flashing FBI badges. Melissa Carter Hayes, Ryan Hayes, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempting to extort a federal witness. Melissa's face drained of color. She turned to me, terror in her eyes. Mom, what are you doing? You're turning your own daughter in? I squeezed my hands to keep them from shaking and met her gaze. You chose this path, Melissa. You betrayed me, not the other way around. Ryan tried to stand, but an agent cuffed him first. He growled, Helen, you don't get it. Edward wasn't clean either. Agent Martinez cut him off cold. Save it. We know more than you do. Mr. Carter wasn't just clean, he helped bring down the organization you used to lean on for money. I watched Melissa get handcuffed, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I didn't feel weak anymore. I stood tall, like all those years of being ignored were finally being paid back. 6 months later, the house on Oakwood Drive had changed. Edward's old study became a bright art studio. I set up an easel by the window that looks out to the Rockies, morning light pouring over the colors I mixed. On the wall hung my first self-portrait in decades, a woman standing in the sun, head high, eyes on the horizon. Charles stopped by, setting a financial report on the new granite counter. I picked myself. He smiled. Helen, your foundation is up and running. 15 elder abuse suits have already been helped. You set a precedent. I nodded, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the shabby motel days. I used $15 million of Edward's money to start the Helen Carter Fund to help older people who've been exploited by family or caretakers. The sentencing of Melissa and Ryan, 18 months in federal prison, made headlines. Organizations invited me to speak. Netflix even signed on to make a documentary called The Widow's Revenge. I smiled thinking about the day Melissa handed me that nursing home brochure. If she could see me now, she wouldn't believe it. In the evenings, when the mountain wind blows, I stand on the porch with a glass of red wine. I look out at the lavender beds I replanted. No one tells me how to live anymore. No one calls me just the wife or a useless mother. I am Helen Carter, the woman who rose from pain and turned betrayal into power. And that, to me, is the biggest victory. One early autumn morning, as soft golden sunlight fell over the lavender garden, I received an envelope from the federal prison. Inside was Melissa's 17th letter. Her handwriting shook, nothing like the arrogance she once carried. Mom, I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. Please give me a chance to start over, because I'm still your daughter. I sat still, holding the letter in my hands. For a brief moment, the mother in me softened. But then I lifted my eyes to the self-portrait hanging in my studio, a woman standing tall in the light, her face calm and strong. I whispered to myself, a daughter can betray you, but true strength never will. Family isn't who shares your DNA. It's who never leaves you in the dark. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer, where the other 16 rested untouched. I didn't need to read more. Apologies can't mend the fractures carved deep into the heart. Instead of drowning in the past, I chose the present. The Helen Carter Fund kept growing, known by more and more people. I often met elderly men and women who clasped my hands, their tears falling as they whispered, "Your story gave us courage." Each time, I felt Edward was still beside me, smiling with pride. He chose to protect our family in his way. And I chose to protect people like me, those who'd been treated as invisible, as weak. At night, I'd step onto the porch, watching the sun dip behind the Rockies. The cool breeze carried the scent of pine and mountain mist. I tightened my grip on the wine glass, smiling. I was no longer the woman thrown out of her home with 2 suitcases. I was the woman who learned to turn loss into strength. And if one day Melissa truly changes, maybe I'll listen. But until then, I'll keep walking my own path. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't watching someone fall. It's standing up and living brighter than ever.